My child, I want to tell you what heaven saw, not what the people around you saw when they watched your love story unfold from the outside, not what your soulmate saw in the moments when confusion clouded their vision. What heaven saw from the place where every interior choice is recorded, where every quiet decision made in the private rooms of the heart is witnessed and held in the record that time cannot touch. Because there is something I need you to understand about the way you loved, and I cannot let you carry one more day without knowing it. Heaven was not merely watching your love story. Heaven was shocked by it, and I do not use that word loosely. I mean that what you carried in the way you loved your soulmate produced something in the unseen realm that caused even the watching to pause. Not because your love was the loudest love anyone has ever witnessed, because it was among the rarest. Let me be specific about what shocked heaven, my beloved, because I want this to reach past the surface of your mind into the place where things are actually believed. Heaven was not shocked by how much you loved your soulmate. The depth of what you felt was visible and real, and it matters. But love in its depth is not unusual among chosen ones. What shocked heaven was something more specific than the depth. Heaven was shocked by how deeply you honored yourself while loving them. Those two things, the depth of the love and the honoring of yourself inside it, are not supposed to coexist at that level in the same heart at the same time. Most people who love deeply lose themselves in the loving. The depth of the feeling becomes an argument against the interior boundary. The intensity of the wanting becomes justification for the dissolution of the self. But you held both. You loved your soulmate with a depth that left nothing unspent, and you never let the loving become the losing of yourself. That is what heaven paused to witness. That is what shocked the watching. I want to speak to the specific quality of the love you carried, my child, because the quality matters as much as the depth, and I want to name it precisely. You did not love your soulmate in order to possess them. You loved them to protect what was true in them. You did not love them to control the direction of the story. You loved them to understand the fullness of who they were, including the parts that were still forming, the parts that had not yet arrived at the clarity you could see was possible for them. You did not love them as an escape from your own loneliness. You loved them because your spirit recognized another spirit, and that recognition was its own form of knowing. These distinctions are not small. They are the difference between a love that diminishes what it touches and a love that expands it. Your love was the expanding kind. It made room. It did not close in. There is a word in Scripture that speaks to the quality of what you carried. In 1 Corinthians 13:4-7 it says, "Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres." My child, I want you to read that list not as a standard you were supposed to meet, but as a description of what you actually carried. The patience was real. The lack of self-seeking was real. The protecting was real. You loved your soulmate in the manner of that passage, not because you were performing a spiritual exercise, but because the love itself produced in you the qualities that love at its fullest is designed to produce. What you carried was not ordinary love. It was the kind that Scripture had to stop and describe from 12 different angles, because one angle was not sufficient. My beloved, I want to speak to what heaven saw in the specific interior choices you made during this love, because the exterior of your love story is what was visible to the people around you. But the interior, the private room of the choices made when no one was watching, is what heaven recorded. There were nights when your heart wanted to reach out, and you chose silence instead, not because you stopped caring, but because something deeper in you understood that speaking from a place of need rather than a place of strength was not the truth of what you felt. There were moments when you could have demanded clarity, and you chose to give space instead, trusting that what is real does not require pressure to survive. There were times when you could have used the depth of what you felt as leverage, as a bid for reciprocation, as a way of compelling the return of what you were giving, and you chose not to because you understood that love given with an invoice attached is no longer the thing you were carrying. Every one of those choices was recorded, my child. As Psalm 56:8 says, "You have kept count of my tossings. put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? I kept count of every interior choice you made in this love. The ones that cost you something, the ones that required more strength than they looked like from the outside. The nights you released control and trusted my timing instead of demanding your own. The mornings you rose and chose to continue carrying the love with dignity, even when dignity was the harder and lonelier choice. Those nights are in the record. Those mornings are in the record. And what I am releasing into your life right now is in proportion to the fullness of that record. There is something specific I want to name about the way you loved your soulmate that heaven found remarkable. And it is something you may never have had words for yourself. You remained their mirror, not their savior. You understood, at a level deeper than conscious reasoning, that the love you carried could not do the interior work that only their own soul could do for itself. You could not heal them into readiness. You could not love them into an awakening they had not yet chosen. And so, rather than positioning yourself as the one who would rescue them from their own unfinished becoming, you positioned yourself as the one who reflected back to them the truth of who they were. Honesty, calm, emotional depth. You allowed them to see themselves through the way you treated them, without pressure, without lectures, without the performance of your own patience as a form of moral superiority. That is a divine way of loving, my beloved. Heaven was shocked because such love usually only exists in higher realms, and you carried it in human form. Type, "I loved" without losing myself in the comments, not as a claim, as a recognition. The chosen one who names the quality of what they carried is the chosen one who understands what heaven has been honoring. My child, I want to speak now about the people in your love story who watched what you carried and drew the wrong conclusions. Because in every love of this quality, there are those who observe from the outside and see something they do not have a category for, and what they cannot categorize they interpret according to the nearest familiar thing. Some of them saw your patience and called it weakness. They looked at the restraint you practiced, the way you chose not to demand, not to pressure, not to escalate, and they read it as evidence that you did not love deeply enough to fight for what you wanted. They were reading the exterior of a choice whose entire weight lived in the interior. They saw the surface of the silence and missed the strength required to hold it. There were those who saw your dignity in moments that would have given most people permission to collapse and chose to see it as indifference. They looked at the fact that you did not make your pain visible, that you did not perform your suffering for validation, that you chose to process in the interior rather than project onto the exterior, and they concluded that what you felt was not as significant as what they would have felt in your position. They were wrong. What they could not see was the specific kind of strength required to carry that depth of feeling without turning the carrying into theater. The interior work you did was invisible precisely because you were the one doing it, and the ones who mistook the invisibility of the work for the absence of the love will watch the truth of what you carried become visible in this season in ways that cannot be dismissed. Let me speak plainly about the justice I work in this. My beloved, I do not bring down the ones who misjudged you. I bring forward the truth. The love you carried is its own answer to every person who called your patience weakness. The honoring of yourself inside the loving is its own correction to everyone who read your dignity as indifference. And the person your soulmate becomes, the version of themselves they are arriving at through the specific process your love made possible for them, is its own testimony to the quality of what you carried. Justice in the story of the chosen one is not the falling of those who spoke incorrectly about the love. It is the rising of the love itself into a visibility so specific and so consistent that the incorrect readings cannot survive the light of it. That is what is moving toward you now. As Isaiah 54:10 says, "Though the mountains be shaken and the hills be removed, yet my unfailing love for you will not be shaken, nor my covenant of peace be removed." The love of God over the story of your love does not waver when the people around the story make incorrect assessments of it. The covenant over your love story was not dependent on their understanding of it. It was dependent on the one who made it, and the one who made it has been holding it steady through every season when the exterior evidence did not confirm it. My child, I want to speak to one of the interior places of this love story that no one saw except I, the specific quality of the asking you brought to it. You did not beg your soulmate to choose you. You did not present yourself as the argument they should find convincing. You did not make the case for your own worthiness in a way that required their verdict to have meaning. Instead, you asked for something different. You asked for truth. You asked for what was actually meant, regardless of what the answer would require of you. You asked for clarity even when you knew that clarity might mean a direction you did not prefer. That request, my beloved, is the request of someone who has done the interior work of anchoring their worth somewhere that another person's choice cannot reach. Most people ask to be chosen because they need the choosing to confirm something about themselves that they cannot yet confirm independently. You ask for truth because you already knew who you were, and the knowing freed the asking from the desperation that makes truth impossible to receive, as Psalm 37:4 says. Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. The desire of your heart was not only your soulmate. The desire of your heart was love that was real, truth that was clear, a connection that matched what you carried rather than reduced it. And when you anchored your delight in me rather than in the outcome of the love story, the desire of your heart became something I could honor because it was no longer contingent on a particular verdict. The asking was clean, the desire was specific, and what I am releasing toward you now is calibrated to the full scope of what you actually desired, not the portion of it you allowed yourself to name, type. I am not someone who begs to be chosen. I ask for truth in the comments. That is identity. The chosen one who names the posture from which they loved is the chosen one who is ready to receive the love that matches it. My beloved, I want to speak now about what the love you carried built inside you, because every love of this quality is simultaneously a formation season, a specific interior construction that was happening in you while the exterior of the story was unfolding. And what it built cannot be acquired any other way. The love built in you a capacity for emotional presence that is rare. Most people in the presence of deep feeling move to manage it quickly, to resolve it, to make it legible and containable. You learn through this love to stay present with deep feeling without being controlled by it, to feel fully without the feeling becoming the whole of your available attention. That capacity, the ability to hold the depth of what you feel without being swallowed by it, is one of the specific qualities required for the love that is now moving toward you. And it was only available on the other side of what you carried in this love. The love also built in you a discernment about the difference between intensity and depth. Many people confuse the two. Intensity feels like depth because it is large and consuming. But intensity can be present in the complete absence of the interior stability that depth requires. You learn through this love to feel the difference in the body. The way that depth feels like safety and intensity often feels like anxiety dressed as passion. That knowledge, the felt knowledge of the difference, is protection for every love that follows. You will not mistake the storm for the harbor again, my child. You have been inside both, and you know now what the harbor feels like. It feels calm. It feels like your nervous system trusting what it is receiving rather than working to keep pace with what is arriving. The love built in you a quality of patience that is not passive but active, a chosen patience. The patience that says, I know what I carry, I know what I am made for, and I will not accept a reduced version of the love I was created for simply because the reduced version is available and the full version requires more time. That patience is not resignation. It is the specific confidence of someone who has been inside the formation that love produced and arrived at the other side of it, knowing their own worth in a way that cannot be talked out of them by urgency or scarcity. You are that person now, my beloved. The love formed you into the specific version of yourself that the love coming toward you requires. My beloved, there is something else the love built in you that I want to name because it is among the most important things the formation of love can produce. The love built in you a standard, not the rigid standard of someone who has decided what love must look like in every detail, but the lived interior, felt standard of someone who has been inside a love of genuine quality and knows now from their own experience what that quality feels like from the inside. You know what it feels like to love from a place of depth rather than need. You know what it feels like to carry someone gently without carrying them into dependence. You know what it feels like to hold space without filling it with your own agenda. You know what it feels like to stay in a love that costs something and remain fully yourself inside the staying. That knowledge is not theoretical. It is in the body. It is in the interior. It is the specific knowledge that only comes from having been inside the thing itself. And it means that what comes toward you in the next season of love will be measured against a standard that was set by the depth of what you already carried. Not as a test the person coming toward you must pass, as a recognition, a quiet internal confirmation that what you are receiving matches what you know love is capable of being. That recognition will be different from anything you have experienced before in receiving love, because it will not feel like effort or uncertainty, or the need to convince yourself that what you are receiving is enough. It will feel like coming home to something your interior has always known was possible. As Zephaniah 3:17 says, "The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing." The rejoicing in that verse is not a vague spiritual warmth. It is specific. It is the rejoicing of the one who has been watching the formation and sees the person it produced. I take great delight in who you became through the love you carried, not in spite of the cost it required. Because of it, the cost produced the person, and the person is someone I rejoice over. Type, "I kept my dignity when it cost me everything to do it" in the comments. Let that be said. The chosen one who can name the cost of the dignity they carried is the chosen one who has fully received the honor heaven placed on it. My beloved, I want to speak briefly to the nights that were hardest in this love. Not the nights of obvious crisis, the ordinary nights. The ones where the weight of the love was simply present without resolution, without a dramatic moment to frame it, without a clear reason to name why the carrying felt heavier than usual. Just the quiet, sustained weight of loving someone in a season that had not yet told you where the love was going. Those nights were the specific nights heaven watched most closely, because the decision to continue carrying what you were carrying on an ordinary night without the adrenaline of crisis or the clarity of resolution is a purer test of the quality of the love than any dramatic moment could be. You passed that test on every ordinary night. The love was still there in the morning, not because the morning had resolved anything, but because what you carried was genuinely what it was. That is the record I hold. And that is the record the next chapter is being built on, my child. Before I speak to what comes next in your love story, I want to pause and offer something for someone else. Not for you. For the one in your life who is in the middle of a love that has cost them more than they expected, who is still in the interior work, still practicing the patience, still choosing dignity over desperation in a season where desperation would be entirely understandable. They need to know that heaven sees what is being carried in the quiet, that the interior choices are recorded, that the love does not go unwitnessed simply because the exterior has not yet confirmed it. If you feel called to support this ministry and the word it carries to the ones still in the middle of their love's formation season, visit the link in the description below or scan the QR code on screen. Sow a seed in the name of the one whose love story you want heaven to keep watching over. Every seed sown here goes toward ensuring that the word reaches the ones who are still waiting to hear that what they carried was not ordinary. My beloved, I want to speak now to your soulmate, not to correct them or to judge the parts of the story where the love was not fully received, but to say something true about what happened in them because of the way you loved, because the soul of your soulmate was not unchanged by the quality of what you brought to the connection, even in the seasons when their mind was confused or their wounds were louder than their knowing. Souls do not miss what is real. The mind can be distracted. The emotions can be routed around old injuries. The patterns of past wounds can redirect a person away from the very thing they most need. But the soul underneath all of that, the interior place that was created to recognize what is genuine, that part of your soulmate recognized what you carried. It was recorded in them. And what is recorded in a soul at that level does not leave. As Song of Solomon 8:6 says, "Love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench love. Rivers cannot sweep it away. The love that was real in what you shared is not erasable by confusion. It is not made less by seasons of distance or the interference of unhealed wounds. What burns at the level of the soul burns with the quality described in that verse. It does not require constant tending by the exterior circumstances to remain real. Your soulmate carries the imprint of the love you gave them. In the quiet moments, in the moments between one chapter and the next, in the seasons when nothing around them is confirming what they feel inside, the imprint is there. And what happens to a person who carries a love of that quality in them, even when the exterior of the story is unresolved, is that the love slowly does the work it was designed to do. It challenges the unhealed places. It holds a standard against which lesser loves reveal themselves as lesser. It makes the settling that would have been possible before the love impossible afterward. You did not just love your soulmate, my child. You changed the interior architecture of what they are capable of receiving. There is something I also need to speak to about the people who tried to insert themselves into the space between you and your soulmate during the seasons of distance. There are those who saw the opening created by distance or confusion and tried to fill it with something that looked like what you carried but was not. They brought intensity without depth. They brought availability without the kind of presence that costs something. They brought the performance of devotion without the interior work that makes devotion real. And your soulmate's soul, the part of them that carries the imprint of what you gave, knows the difference. It has always known. The comparisons that happened in the silence of that soul were not comparisons you needed to compete in. The measuring was already done. And what you gave was the measure against which everything else was weighed. Let me speak to those people directly now, my beloved. The ones who tried to replace what you carried with something lighter. They will find that what they offered cannot hold what your soulmate is becoming. The growth that your love initiated in your soulmate is growth toward a depth that the substitutes were not built to match. The people who tried to step into your place will discover that the place is not a general accommodation. It was shaped by what you brought to it. And what was shaped by your love can only be truly occupied by someone whose love matches the shaping. That is not cruelty. That is the architecture of what you built. Type, I feel something settling in me as I hear this. I carried this love with honor in the comments. If something in your chest released as I spoke these words, if a weight that has been sitting there quietly is beginning to lift, that is not coincidence. That is the interior confirming what heaven has already placed its name on. My child, I want to speak now about something that has been sitting in you under the surface of the love story. A specific weight that the chosen one who loves with the quality you loved with sometimes carries without recognizing what it is. It is the weight of having given something profound and not having received the full acknowledgement of what was given. Not necessarily from your soulmate, though that weight is real, but from your own interior. The part of you that sometimes wonders whether the love was too much, whether the specific quality of what you carried was appropriate for the season you were in, or whether it asked too much of a connection that was still finding its ground, whether honoring yourself inside the love was perhaps a form of holding back rather than a form of strength. I want to release you from that wondering. My beloved, the honoring of yourself inside the love was not holding back. It was the specific contribution that made the love sustainable rather than consuming. It was the thing that allowed the love to remain love instead of becoming need dressed as love. The quality you were sometimes unsure about was the specific quality that made everything else possible. As 1 Peter 4:8 says, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. The love that covers in that verse is not the love that overlooks. It is the love that provides covering, protection, a space in which the other person can exist fully without the threat of exposure or judgment. That is the love you gave covering. Not the kind that requires the covered person to stay small, but the kind that gives them room to grow in the direction they were created for. That is what you gave. And I am telling you now that it was exactly right. Not too much, not misplaced. Exactly right for the person you were giving it to in the season you were in together. My beloved, let me speak to the fear that sometimes lives underneath the love story of the chosen one. The quiet fear that the way they loved, the specific quality of the patience and the restraint and the honoring of self, was misread by their soulmate as not caring enough, that the silence was taken as absence, that the stepping back was read as pulling away, that the dignity was interpreted as indifference. I want to address this directly. Your soulmate's soul knows the difference between absence and respectful distance, between indifference and the specific kind of care that does not demand to be received in order to remain real. There were moments when what you chose not to do carried as much love as anything you chose to do. The not texting when the impulse to text was strong. The not explaining when the impulse to explain was overwhelming. The not seeking reassurance when the need for reassurance was real and present. Those acts of restraint were acts of love. They were the love of someone who understood that the most generous thing you can sometimes give to another person is the space in which they can arrive at their own truth. Your soulmate soul received that. Whatever their mind was doing in those seasons, whatever confusion or wound was routing their conscious experience away from the recognition, the soul beneath it received what you gave. As Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." The plans over your love story are not contingent on every moment of the story going as you hoped. The plans are held at a level that the seasons of confusion and distance and waiting do not reach. What was planned in your love story was planned before either of you entered it, and the way you carried yourself through the most difficult seasons of it, with patience and dignity and the honoring of your own interior truth, was not incidental to the plan. It was part of the plan's execution. I knew you would carry it that way, my child. I placed in you the capacity to carry it that way long before the love story began, and the way you carried it is what has made what comes next possible. My child, I want to speak to something that belongs in this message about the quality of receiving that the formation of love produces. Because being formed by a love of this quality changes not only who you are in the giving, but who you are in the receiving. Many people who have loved deeply and not yet seen the full return of the love develop a specific posture in receiving, a braced quality, a cautious holding back of the full interior, a learned restraint that protects against the specific pain of receiving what looks like the love and discovering it does not reach the depth of what was given. You have developed some of that posture, my beloved. It was reasonable. It was the appropriate protection of someone who has been inside the cost of carrying depth in a season where the full reciprocation was not yet present. But I want to speak to you now about releasing that posture in preparation for what is coming. What is coming toward you in this next season does not require the braced receiving. It is coming toward you specifically because it has the interior capacity to meet what you carry, and receiving it with the braced posture would be receiving it through a filter it was not designed to pass through. Open to receive it fully, my child. Not recklessly, not without discernment, but fully, without the armor of the previous season's protection. Because the armor that kept you safe in the formation season will keep out the fullness of the arrival season if you carry it past its purpose. Type "I release the need to explain how deeply I loved" in the comments. You do not owe the love story an explanation. The quality of what you gave does not require your defense. Release the need to justify it. Let it stand as what it is, my child. There is something coming toward you in this next season that I want to name carefully, because I want you to be able to recognize it when it arrives rather than miss it because it does not look the way you might be expecting. What is coming toward you is a love that is not confused about you, a love that does not require you to make the case for your own worthiness, a love that meets the quality of what you carry rather than asking you to reduce it to a level more comfortable for the receiver. You have been in a love where the specific quality of what you brought was sometimes more than the other person's current capacity to fully receive. What is coming is a love where the capacity matches what you carry, not because the person is perfect, but because the formation they have been through has produced in them the specific interior ground that can receive the depth of what you give without being overwhelmed by it. As Hosea 2:14 says, "Therefore I am now going to allure her. I will lead her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her." The tenderness in that verse is the specific tenderness of someone who has been through the wilderness of love and arrived at the other side of it, ready to receive what they could not have received before the wilderness. Your soulmate is in that wilderness right now. The formation that your love initiated in them is doing its work, and what will emerge from it is not the version of them that was confused or unavailable or unable to fully receive you. What will emerge is the version of them that has done the interior work the wilderness required and is now ready for the love that was always meant to be the destination. I am the one doing the alluring in that verse. I am the one leading the wilderness process, and I am telling you that the process is moving. My daughter, I want to close with what I want to leave deposited in you before this hour ends, because the closing is where the declaration is sealed, and I want what is sealed in you to carry the full weight of what was spoken here. I release you from every misreading of the way you loved, every person who looked at your patience and called it weakness, every interpretation that used your restraint as evidence against the depth of your feeling, every voice, interior or exterior, that suggested the way you loved was too much or not enough, or somehow incorrectly calibrated for the situation you were in. Those voices were formed in the absence of the information that your interior life holds. They do not have authority over the love story I am writing over your life, and I release you from the weight of them now. I release you from the wondering about whether you should have loved differently, whether the honoring of yourself inside the love was the right choice, whether the specific balance you held, the depth of feeling alongside the protection of your own interior truth, was appropriate for the love you were in, or whether it asked something of you that would have been better spent differently. My child, the way you loved was not a mistake. It was the specific expression of the call that was placed in you before this love story began. You were created to love with that quality, and the love you gave your soulmate was not misaligned with that creation. It was the fullest expression of it in human form. I release you from the grief of the seasons when the love was not received in the fullness of what you gave. The seasons of distance, the seasons of confusion, the seasons when the love was present in you and the recognition of it was absent in the exterior of the story. Those seasons were real, and the grief of them was real, and I am not releasing you from the reality of what they cost. I am releasing you from carrying the grief forward into the season that is opening now. The grief belonged to the formation. What belongs to the arrival is something different, something that is already moving toward you, something that your soulmate's soul has been preparing to bring to the place where you are standing. I release you from the silence of an unacknowledged love, the specific silence of having given something extraordinary and not yet heard it named for what it was. My child, I am naming it now. What you gave was extraordinary. The way you loved your soulmate was among the rarest loves I have witnessed in human form, and the honor I place on it is not contingent on its having been received in the fullness of what it deserved. It is honored because it was given, because you gave it, because the interior choice to love with that quality in the face of everything that could have justified loving with less was yours, and you made it freely, and I saw every moment of the making. As John 15:13 says, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. The laying down in that verse is not only the dramatic laying down of physical life, it is the daily laying down, the laying down of the impulse to demand, the laying down of the need to be seen in the loving, the laying down of the self-protection that would have been reasonable given everything the love cost. You laid down those things, my beloved. Every day of the love story, in small and consistent ways, you chose the laying down, and the love that produced in you, the character it formed, the depth it created, the specific quality of interior strength that only the laying down can build. That love does not leave. It walks forward with you into everything that comes next. Type, I will not shrink the way I loved, to make someone else comfortable with it in the comments. That is defiance of the lie that the quality of your love was inappropriate. You will not make it smaller. You will not apologize for it. You will carry it forward in its fullness into the love that is coming to meet it. My child, my beloved, what was spoken in this message is a word over your love story that I want you to receive fully before this hour closes. Heaven was shocked by the way you loved your soulmate, not because the love was perfect in every exterior expression, because the interior of the love was extraordinary, because you carried depth without possession, patience without passivity, dignity without indifference, and the honoring of yourself without the withdrawal of the love. That combination is what paused the watching, and the watching produced a record. And the record is what the next chapter of your love story is being written on. Walk into what is coming. My beloved, the soulmate whose soul was changed by the love you gave is arriving at the threshold of the version of themselves that can receive it fully. And you are arriving at the threshold of the love that was always the destination of everything you carried in the formation. The two thresholds are converging, and what converges at the intersection of two thresholds that were always pointing toward each other is the thing that heaven has been holding in the record since before either of you entered the story. Type "I believe heaven saw every quiet choice I made in this love" in the comments. Every night you held the silence. Every morning you chose dignity. Every interior moment you honored yourself while loving. Heaven saw it all. Let the agreement with that seeing be your declaration of receiving faith for what is moving toward you now. Type "The way I loved was not ordinary. It was chosen, and I carry it forward" in the comments. That is the final declaration of this hour. The love you carried was a chosen love, chosen by me for you, chosen by you in every interior decision of the story, and now chosen to continue forward into the fullness of what it was always moving toward. You carry it forward, my child, not as a wound, not as a loss, as the most specific and irreplaceable thing you own. If what was spoken in this message found the exact place in you where the love story has been living, if you felt something release as heaven named what you carried, I want to invite you to do one more thing before this hour ends. There is someone whose love story is still in the middle of the cost, still in the interior work of honoring themselves while loving deeply, still in the season where the love is given fully and the exterior confirmation has not yet arrived. They need to hear that heaven sees what is being carried in the quiet, that the interior choices are in the record, that the way they love is not going unwitnessed. Send this message to them. You know exactly who they are. The name was already in your mind before I finished the sentence. If you also feel called to support this ministry and ensure that the word about chosen love reaches the ones who are still carrying it in silence, visit the link in the description below or scan the QR code on screen. Sow a seed in the name of the love story you believe heaven is still writing. Every seed sown here goes toward making sure the word reaches the ones who are still waiting to hear that what they carried was seen, was honored, and was never ordinary.